Okay. Let's see if I got this mic working. I can see my audio levels, so hopefully it's working. Let's talk about the Pareto principle. The Pareto principle is that 80% of your outputs can be tied back to 20% of your inputs. In other words, 20% of your inputs are responsible for 80% of the outputs or outcomes or results, put another way. I shared this with the team last week, and it's something that is on my mind a lot. I'm looking at my own life, and I'm looking at all of my outcomes, all of my results, and it's likely that 80% of them are attributable to 20% of my inputs. And that probably correlates with time. So 80% of my outcomes are probably correlated to 20% of my time, or something rough like that. The idea is that it's going to be exponential, that a large portion, the majority of the outcomes are going to be attributable to a small percentage of the inputs. And I think that that's probably true across the board. My financial results, in a sense, fitness and health. That one's an interesting one now that I'm thinking about it on the fly. But the takeaway for me over the last week is that the Pareto principle can be applied 2 and 3 and 4 and X number of times on the same environment. So if you look at 80% of your results and 20% of your inputs, you can do that again. So if you look and hone in on those 20% inputs, there's another distribution inside those, and you can use the 80-20 rule again, and again, and again, and again, and again. And pretty soon, depending on what environment you're looking at, it comes down to a very, very small number of inputs. And in some cases, you could say one input, one decision. And to me, that's fascinating because so much hinges on just a couple things. I've been thinking about that in terms of work. There it's fairly straightforward, where I am, we'll just say paid. I'm paid to make a small number of good decisions. And the responsibility of that is daunting because it also means that there could be something that is very small behind which lies a tremendous amount of value. And a lot of times it's sins of omission in cases like this, where there's an opportunity that we don't do anything about. Maybe the opportunity is visible, or maybe it's not. Maybe there's something, if we just rolled back a couple layers, we would see a gaping hole in the strategy or a massive market opportunity on which we could capitalize quickly. So it, in its most basic sense, is be careful, or not even be careful at the first level. It's acknowledge the fact that behind every result is one or a set of inputs. That behind every outcome is a principle or a law. And this can get very complex very quickly, but it's very much the way that I see life and our experience is behind every outcome there is a set of laws that was either adhered to or not. And there are many ways that you could put this or interpret this. One of them is that you will never get away with anything. That there's an immutable ledger, if you will, of all action from everyone at all times. And that's true at an individual level. And I think often about the ledger of my life and the inputs and the outcomes. And that things don't disappear. And by the same token, they don't come out of nowhere. It's input. It's like the law of thermodynamics in decision making. It's energy is not created or destroyed, it's just transferred. Our agency doesn't come from nowhere and go nowhere and disappear. We have this ability to make decisions and impose our will on an environment. Not that it's going to result in our intention, but we do have the ability to affect things. And that has to be, or should be, an intentional thing. We don't have complete control over the results, but we do have complete control over a set of inputs. And that's true across all categories of our life. It's true in fitness, it's true in education, our social lives. I've been thinking about it in terms of relationships, and I think that it absolutely is true in relationships. It has to do with our intellect. It's present everywhere. It's inescapable, for better or worse. And the way that I like to see it is that it's for better, that you can affect things, that you can get better, that your decisions matter, that you need to be intentional in order to achieve the highest number of your intended outcomes. And it's important to acknowledge again, as I already have, that it doesn't mean that everything will pan out every time and that you have complete control over all. But you do have probably more control than you think. The team and I were talking about this principle the other day when I was sharing some of this stuff. We were talking about ownership, and to me, I went so far as to say, don't complain about your house getting hit by a tornado if you chose to live in Kansas. And the team chuckled. And they're like, yeah, funny. But I'm quite serious, because let's say a tornado comes through and ravages everything you own. Well, you can spend the rest of your life pointing your finger at the tornado or shaking your fist at heaven, or you could say, that's on me. It's also acknowledging that that's a potential outcome when you make that decision up front. Like, I'm going to do this thing, and among the potential outcomes is this, and the downside risk is really high. Some of those things you can foresee, some of them you can't, but it's worth taking a moment to say, what could happen? What are some of the really good things that could happen? What are some of the really bad things? Or what is the worst thing that could happen? And you know what? If having your stuff destroyed by a tornado is something that you would put in the category of unacceptable downside risk, then you don't move to Kansas. You don't move to Kansas. So I look at my life and some of the decisions that we've made, and that's been a clarifying decision-making principle for me, is the unacceptable downside risk. I like to overlay that on my decisions. And, what is the worst thing that could go wrong? Well, depends on the scenario. In our case, I've asked that question many times, financially. So we're on the entrepreneurship journey, right? It's risky. There are many other things that I could do that would offer more security. So why don't I do them? A lot of reasons, but the downside risk we've just hedged against with the way that we've set up our lives generally, but finances specifically. We have a ton of runway. So, what would we do? Well, we could sell our house and move into a one-bedroom apartment. We would be totally fine. We could burn for years. We literally could burn for years and be fine. We could move into the basement, rent out the top floor of our house. There are so many things that we could do. We've given ourselves just options. There are a lot of portfolios that we could draw from. There are a lot of different things that are set up for different reasons that would allow us flexibility to hedge against what we would consider unacceptable downside risk of having no money and going out of business. Or me, becoming incapacitated. What would happen in that case? Yeah, I don't mean to go down a rabbit hole, but you prepare for those types of things because you have control over a lot of them. And I suppose that that's the point. So if we circle all the way back, I've gone on some tangents in just a couple minutes, but it helps me understand the principle even more. There's one final point that I've been thinking about in regard to the 80-20 rule. The 80-20 rule governs a lot of the fad around 4-hour work week. And I'm not pointing fingers at Tim Ferriss. I'm just categorizing the idea in that title. You could have so much control over the inputs and identify the most valuable activities such that you provide enough value to work little. I think that you should do that, but not in an effort to minimize the amount of work you do, but to minimize the amount of unvaluable work that you do. So what if average Joe works 40 hours, works 50 hours, and his workload could reasonably be condensed into 5 hours? Maybe that's completely unreasonable, but maybe it isn't. In the realm of knowledge work, it's not that far-fetched. And that's what I do. That's what a lot of people do. So what if you take average Joe's work from 50 hours to 4, or 40 hours to 4? It makes the example easier. And then you work 40 hours. That is 10 times more work done. Arguably 10 times the value created. At least that's what the aim should be, is to significantly ratchet up the value by identifying the most valuable activities and doing those. So I think that that is fascinating because it's my goal to continue to work 50, 60, 70, 80 hours a week. And I can't remember the last time I worked 40 hours in a week. But I don't aspire to work 40 or 30 or 20 or 10 or 5 or no hours a week. Our shoulders are built to carry worthwhile burdens. That's one of the ways that I've come up with to put it. Not that that's original to me, but we are built for burdens. We're built to carry things. We're built to work. So what if we can just make it more likely that the things we're working on are valuable things that are worthwhile, that are worth doing. And you just do that 80-20 rule again and again and again, and then spread it out. And what I mean by spread it out is identify other areas where you can generate value. So you do the 80-20 rule inside work, and you do it 3 times. And you do the 80-20 rule in your relationships 3 times. And you do it in whatever else, whatever category you want to think about. And you just do it over and over and over and over and over again. Pretty soon you've come up with the most valuable single or 2 or 3 activities in each of the categories of your life. That's powerful. That's powerful, and you're not going to be wasting a lot of time. So I feel like I've gone down the road in doing that. There's certainly more to do. So this is a reminder to me to continue to do that. Identify valuable activities, realize that value creation is disproportionate to inputs and time. A lot of the result will be tied back to a few of the inputs. So 80-20 rule, Wilfredo Pareto. Thank you for your contribution in the world. To me, this makes a ton of sense and is a lot of the way that I run my life and make decisions. All right, peace.